Hello my friends, this is AJ the Mighty Gluestick. Nice to see you again. Seems like I was just talking to you yesterday. Okay, so today I'm going to be covering one of the offshoot races of Goblin. This is called the Norker, and they stem back from the Fiend Folio, and they've had a bit of a covering in various other things, including most notably Dragon number 343, where you could actually play as a Norker as a player character. So what is a Norker? I'll cover that, and we'll also talk about some of the other goblin kind at the end of this video. So stay tuned. So a Norker is the relatives of goblins and hobgoblins. Norkers are goblinoids that forsake armor in favor of their incredibly tough hides, and it's a characteristic of them, as well as long canine teeth that they use in combat. They are unreliable troops, but very aggressive. They tend to quarrel with each other, which keeps their numbers low compared to most other goblins. They're very disorganized, have trouble holding together a society because of their aggression. They've been described as a pack of unorganized thugs. They resemble goblins, except they have 3-inch long canine teeth, no hair at all. Their skin ranges from a reddish brown to a dark grey colour, almost rock-like. It looks like an exoskeleton, and that's pretty much what it is. The Norker usually wears a loincloth or a belt that it ties its favourite possessions and trophies to, like heads and objects of creatures that it's killed, and just shiny objects and things that it's found, particularly nice bones and things. They speak Goblin, but it's a dialect that is difficult for even hobgoblins to understand, but they can speak to them, and the Norker do understand others fairly well. They are actually intelligent, per se. They're an intelligent breed. They've got a strength of 13, dex of 13, constitution of 14, intelligence is 8, wisdom is 7, and charisma is 6. So they're okay. They're not animals. Most of them that are encountered outside of their homes will be warriors, and the information for them that you see in stat blocks is generally for the warriors. There are Norker females and babies and elders and witch doctors and things like that, but for the most part, elders, the Norkers are fighters. That's what they specialize in. And in combat, they use a particular type of swarming tactic that they're specialized in. Their weapons are simple and usually crudely made. They will be some sort of a hammer or a double axe or something like that, and if they've been equipped by a superior force, such as hobgoblins who are sending them in as skirmishing shock troops, they'll equip them with a nice hefty axe. They're not averse to taking better weapons from fallen foes also, and they may have actually latched onto some sort of say a halberd or a bardiche or something like that, that they may have cut down the haft from, and are just using the head of it as a modified great axe. When bullied into submission by hobgoblins, they use basic military tactics, but they lapse into their old ways when they're not supervised, and typically the hobgoblins will keep them organized until they need to unleash them, in which case the order to unleash the Norkers will be shouted out. They have a +4 racial bonus to move silently, stealth, and yeah, their society per se is tribal, although the leader's influence only really extends as far as they can beat somebody. That means that tribes are much smaller than the typical goblin tribe. You could say that they're squad sized, they're family group sized. They raid and steal from other humanoids, including other goblins, and they're too lazy to do their own hunting, so they'll steal from others, and they'll also raid carrion from other predators. Their lairs are usually caves, old ruins, or villages taken by conquest. They can't cooperate well enough to build anything more than a fence or a short rock wall around their lair, and perhaps a gate or a narrow walkway to narrow it so that they can use their tactics of swarming over targets in a limited area to their advantage. They are also able to rig collapsing barriers and cave-ins and things like that to protect their entranceways against foes that they cannot best, and they just need to keep them out. There usually has as many as, well, say, there's slightly less females than there are males in their groups, but it's a fairly even mix, really. and lots of young adult males typically. Different tribes of Norkers rarely meet, but when they do, the conflict often becomes very vicious, and the victors take the fangs of the losers as trophies, which is another thing they like to hang off their belt. These conflicts rarely result in wholesale slaughter, because it's usually the dominant leaders who get taken, and their teeth being ripped out as a signal to all the others that you either join us or you're going to face the same fate. When powerful groups of hobgoblins command Norkers, they usually equip their lesser cousins with scale mail and shields, which the Norkers aren't that comfortable with. In these situations, the Norkers understand that they're being used as shock troops to absorb the brunt of enemy attacks, while the hobgoblins use superior intelligence tactics and equipment to break up enemy forces, and if they can break them up into smaller groups, the Norkers are more easily able to swarm over them and attack. So what the Norkers do in combat is they will use their axes and things they quickly close with the enemy, and their natural armor class is usually it's around 18 or so. So they're very, very durable and able to resist a lot of damage. And they have a reasonably high hit point total for such small humanoids. They're only about 5 feet tall or so. They're distant relatives of hobgoblins, and most people believe that they're a specifically bred type of primitive hobgoblin. So they're either a precursor of hobgoblins, or they are a natural mutation that has been accentuated by the hobgoblins and into this particular form. Because the hobgoblins always seem to know where the Norkers are if they need them. So yeah, their faces are a slightly brighter shade of their all-over skin color. They have highly colored blue or red noses. Their eyes are yellow, as are their teeth, and the teeth are particularly easy to see because those canines protrude 3 inches from the upper lip, so they come down with a jaw that sort of juts as an overbite, giving Norkers an elongated-looking skull. And those eyes are dark with those bright yellow, so they generally look quite feral with their ears swept back from their heads. They're foul smelling, their breath is disgusting. They're also very stale smelling, with they're odoriferous, with smelling of stale sweat and years of avoiding liquid with any kind of soap in it. They don't typically wear armor, as I mentioned. They do wear skins and trophies, and those can be fairly ornate. They may spend their time sort of making beads and things like that, and weaving bits of skin and things from fallen enemies into some sort of decorative web, that like a shirt that they may wear. And yeah, in combat they favour a typical force of Norkers is armed with clubs and other bludgeoning weapons, and they don't use shields or armour, and they've got axes and things like that which they can hook and trip people to get them down to their scale. And then what they do is they swarm over them and bite with their fangs and latch on. They don't attack with their claws or fists. In fact, their hands are actually not that sturdy compared to the rest of their body. And what they do is they swarm over, swing with their weapons, and then leap onto them and sink their fangs into the victims, and from there they cling on to them if possible and keep on swinging and biting, eventually dragging their prey down by sheer numbers, whereupon they surround them and overwhelm them and just basically beat them or hack them to pieces. And that's the entirety of their combat tactic. They swarm in, overwhelm with numbers, a constant barrage of attacks, and then they bring them down. Yeah. So Norkers, they'll basically kill anything that moves or bleeds, and if desperate, they can survive on grains or other edible plants. Much like most goblins, they're very hardy and adaptable. They'll even dig up corpses and eat those if that's the most freely available food. They don't really have any mores or morals about digging up the dead of other races if it's just meat that's lying around. And they are hunted by other predators in their areas because they're not very capable of producing shelters of their own, although they will take over the shelter of a cave bear or something like that if they've managed to kill it themselves, or if they've driven it off somehow, or they'll witness one large monster killing another large monster and take over the lair of the loser, essentially. And yeah, they'll eat any flesh that is edible. So their armor class and their hit points and things I'll leave up to you. There is some... there's been some updates for... I've got a 4th edition version of the Norker, which is a level 3 soldier. And they've been given a relentless endurance power, which is quite interesting. It's a healing type effect, which allows them to regain 5 hit points at the start of each round while they're bloodied. So essentially, at half hit points, they gain the ability to... unless killed outright, they'll keep on ticking and just regenerate 5 hit points every round, which represents just how ferocious these little critters are. So yeah, as I mentioned, they're only short. They're about 4 foot tall or so. They're hunched, and they've got a deep sort of rasping voice which belies their size. They kind of sound like an angry dog. Yeah. Anyway. I find Norkers particularly fun because they're not they're far more aggressive and vicious than your average goblin, which makes them an interesting change up from the usual style of goblins being sort of sniveling, hit and fade guerrilla sort of troops. With the Norkers are definitely scary little, like almost like armored dwarf shock troops of the goblin kind, and that's exactly how they use them. Other offshoots of goblins. Let's see. We've got the goblins. We've got the bugbears. We've got the hobgoblins, and you could say that the hobgoblins are the true goblins of the goblin race. You've got the Nilbogs, which are a race of magical goblinoids that are healed by receiving damage and are damaged by healing spells. So their name is taken from the word goblin spelt backwards. And these were... Basically, this is a DM who gets sick and tired of players who know everything that's coming at them, so they just throw them a reverso, bizarro monster just to mess with their players. Of all the creatures, which I don't really like, Nilbogs are one of those creatures, just because the premise for their existence is stupid, and I don't think it's very good. That's just my opinion. The Coalinth are a marine species of hobgoblins, similar to the land-dwelling ones in many respects, but having gills and able to live in fresh or salt water. And they have more of an ordered society. They keep to themselves, pretty much. They're not as militaristic as their surface world kin, because they've got a lot to contend with under the ocean waves, including merfolk and kotoa and sahuagin and other things. The Grog Goblins are a special case where an offshoot of goblins were trapped in a demiplane and forcibly civilized with the help of a dragon, and they built a city and things like that. So they come from a specific storyline. The Goblin, spelt with a Y, are created by curses and spells and cursed items and things, and they are transformed from another race, and they forget who they once were, and part of that is a physical transformation into a goblinoid creature who is slavishly devoted to a master of some kind. If they don't have one, they'll look for one. There's the nocturnal goblins known as Kith, who basically live on the surface world, but they still shun the light. And there's the decanter goblins, which are... you see them occasionally in pictures of all the goblin kind joined together, and they basically look like large rhino-like horn-equipped goblins who are stocky and quite vicious. So they're kind of like the Norker in aspects, but they have a horn attack and are otherwise quite similar. But yeah, if you can find some information on them, they're fairly interesting. Blues are, if you're using psychic powers in your game, blues are goblins who are psychically enabled. So they've got a characteristic bluish skin that sets them apart from other goblins, and other than that, they just have psychic powers. So yeah, it's interesting that they manifest psychic powers in blue skin always. So those two things always go together. Buka are good aligned consummate survivors with many adaptations that allow them to thrive in deserts. So Buka are like good natured little Jawas, but they are goblinoids, and they are not overly vicious. They actually get on with other people for the most part. Then you've got shape-shifting eastern goblins called Bakamonos, who are goblins of the Shadowlands, small, powerfully muscled humanoids with intelligence and temperaments of vicious dogs, attack dogs. So they're originally the shape-shifting Obake from Japanese folklore. Then you've got the Amatok, which are white-furred Arctic hobgoblins. And what else? We've got the Norkers. We've got the Snow Goblins, who are kind of the same thing, shaggy humanoids with large throat sacs they can use to call to each other over the mountain distances, like howler monkey yodeling. Then you've got Thuls. These are interesting. Thuls are a magical merging of hobgoblin, troll, and ghoul. They have a regeneration attack. They kind of look like a normal hobgoblin for the most part, but they stay away from the light, and they feed exclusively on dead bodies. But they've got a paralyzing claw attack and bite attack of a ghoul, the regeneration of a troll, and the intelligence of a hobgoblin. And they live comfortably within hobgoblin society. So, yeah, scary. But of course, there's a certain separation from them just being so weirdly unnatural and eating dead bodies. And the Varag, which are faster, considerably stronger, more primitive types of goblins, kind of like speedy Norkers. They're predatory, very fast, twitchy, and they work very well as scouts, mercenaries, and raiders for hobgoblin warbands. You'll quite often find them scouting around. They're unusual in that they are slim, but they stand about 7 foot tall when fighting, but they typically move around on all fours, hunched close to the ground, and running like greyhounds with their entire body springing as they move. It's kind of a freaky animalistic look to them. And when they stand upright to attack you, and they pull out a long sort of rapier-like weapon and move extremely quickly and skillfully, dancing around you with their blade. They're quite scary. And finally, the Vril, which are bred by drow. They've got violent skin with tiger stripes and they're immune to sonic attacks for some reason. But they basically just bred by the drow as soldiers. So that's the offshoots of the goblins for you. There's quite a few, as you can see. Anyway, I'll be back with another monster shortly, next weekend in fact, and I'll be up with another Explores series very soon. If you haven't subscribed already, please do, and spread the word. Let other people know that this resource is available to them for free. And if you have any requests, I'm always open to requests, and if you have any comments on the videos, improvements or changes that you'd like to see, let me know. This channel is largely thanks to the suggestions of people who have been watching my videos over the years, and it's changed and adapted to what people want to see, so I'm always open to that. And any comments that you have down below in the comment section, you'll find that I would typically respond pretty quickly. And if you have any complicated questions, I will do my best to look them up for you and give you some answers. Thanks for listening, everybody. I'll check you again soon.